Right, on to our next part of our adventures with Varjak Paw. And when we left off, Varjak was in Mesopotamia with Jalal, and he just learnt another part of the way, which was hunting. So let's see if that comes in useful in this sinister city he's found himself in. Here we go. Chapter 15. A tongue the texture of gravel licked Varjak's face, calling him up from the dream. Oh, I wonder who that is. It scraped a tender spot on his cheek. Blinding colours burst out in his head. He opened his eyes a crack. A black and white blur swam into view. "Hold still," commanded a gravelly voice. "I know it hurts, but it has to be done." Varjak closed his eyes and thought of Mesopotamia, of Jalal, of that delicious cinnamon food he hadn't eaten. Anything, even hunger, was better than this pain. "There," she said at last. "You'll never win a cat show, but you'll live. You better live." Varjak opened his eyes again. Holly stood above him, Tam behind her. They were in a narrow cobbled alleyway, a quiet path along the backs of the city buildings. Iron fire escapes led up to sooty windows far above. Drain pipes snaked down through grills in the ground to sewers below. Varjak thought he could see something glimmering, moving about beneath the streets, but it was night in the alley and he couldn't be sure. In the distance he could hear those fearsome metal monsters roaring along the roads. He could taste their poison smoke in the air. He could hear too the hisses and growls of street cats as they went about their business. But in this alley the three of them were alone. There was no sign of the Ginger Tom who had nearly killed him. He stretched out, cold, wet cobblestones dug into his ribs. His body was a pulp of pain, yet strangely he didn't feel too bad. Inside, he was glad he was still alive, glad this cat with a gravelly voice had rescued him. "You all right, Varjak?" said Holly. "You've been out for ages." "I thought you didn't want friends," he said. "We're not friends," she snapped. "Tam just made me feel bad about leaving you." "Me?" laughed Tam, as if I could make her do anything. "Anyway, Ginger's gang went too far," said Holly. Varjak stood up unsteadily. "You stopped them, didn't you? I think you saved my life." All right, Holly sounded embarrassed. She wouldn't look him in the eye. With one leap, she pounced onto a brick ledge high on the wall and started to stalk away, spiky as ever. Varjak wasn't about to lose her again. Without a second thought, he went after her. One moment he was down on the cobbles, the next he was on the ledge. His body seemed to know what to do. He only had to follow Holly. Tam came behind him. He padded between them to the edge of the wall, where Holly stopped to look up at the sky. Varjak followed her gaze. A white wedge of moon glimmered there. It had grown since he last saw it. It was changing, becoming bigger and brighter. Varjak looked down from the sky. "Where are we exactly?" "We're in the centre of the city," said Holly. "No one else knows about these alleys. You're safe here." "Safe from what?" "From the gang, stupid. On this side of the park, only the centre is neutral ground. Ginger's gang runs the east. Sally Bones is boss of the west. Whatever you do, don't try and fight her like you did with Ginger. I don't think anyone could help you if you did that. Ginger's rough, but deep down he's still one of us. Sally Bones, she's something else." "Shh," hissed Tam. "She'll hear you." "Don't be stupid," said Holly. "She's everywhere," whispered Tam. "No one's everywhere. It doesn't make sense." "Then how else do you explain it?" said Tam. "You said it yourself. She's not one of us. She's something else." Varjak wondered what she meant. "None of us?" That's what his own family used to tell him. "What's so bad about that then?" he said. Tam's eyes widened as she spoke. "She's all white," Holly snorted. "Big deal. You're all brown, so what?" "She can do things no cat can do," said Tam darkly. "What sort of things?" said Varjak. Tam shuddered. "It's dangerous to even think about it." Holly rolled her eyes. Varjak smiled. Tam was always so dramatic. "I won't tell anyone," he promised. "I can keep a secret." "Well," Tam glanced around nervously. "All right. One thing, she can become invisible. She'll just appear out of thin air and you don't see her coming until it's too late. That's why no one can beat her in a fight." "That's just tales," said Holly, "and I don't believe them. But she's the toughest cat in the city, no question. Even Ginger fears Sally Bones." "Please," begged Tam, "don't say her name." "Her gang's cornering all the food too," continued Holly, "which is why we need to keep these places secret." She dumped down from the wall. Varjak and Tam followed her. They shimmied under a low iron railing into another alley. It would have kept him out if he hadn't seen Holly sneak through first. They're moving in on Ginger's turf now. That's why he was so rough when you went for his bin, she said. Which reminds me, said Tam. What are we eating? I'm hungry. Me too, said Varjak. Holly shrugged. There's nothing here. I've checked already. We could search the park or could go hunting. Hunting means splitting up and going it alone, said Tam. I want to do something all together. She looked down. Besides, hunting's difficult, she muttered. It's not so hard, said Varjak. You, said Holly, squaring up to him, you know how to hunt. He wasn't sure. He felt like he did, but he'd only ever hunted in a dream. I think so. Holly laughed. Huh, you either can or you can't, and I've never met a pet who could. She stared at Tam. Plenty of street cats can't. Just because you know a lot, said Tam, doesn't mean you're great. I'd rather everyone love me than be some boring know-it-all. But I do love you, Tam, grinned Holly. Her mustard eyes sparkled with mischief. You do? Said Tam suspiciously. Of course I do, Holly sounded very sincere. Tam relaxed and smiled. Everyone does, continued Holly. Tam's smile grew wider. And you know who loves you most of all? Who? Said Tam. Who, Holly? Tell me who? Sally Bones! Shouted Holly. Tam leapt back, startled. Holly laughed at the shocked expression on her face. Varjak chuckled behind her mustard eyes. Holly had a sense of humour, but poor Tam hadn't seen it coming, and her shaggy brown coat was standing on end. That's not very funny, said Tam as her fur slowly settled. Come on, smiled Holly. Let's see what we can find in the park. Ooh, what's this? Interesting. They emerged from Holly's secret alleys into a back street. The city was louder here. Varjak could hear the shrieks and roars of those metal monsters close by. There were people too. Their long, striding shadows flickered on the walls and their shoes click-clacked on the pavement. Keep your head down, said Holly as she led the way through black, rain-soaked streets. Don't get seen. You can't be too careful in this part of town. This is where a lot of the vanishings happened, added Tam. That word again. Vanishings. Everyone seemed to be talking about it. What's a vanishing? Said Varjak. It happens all over the city, Tam whispered, but especially here. One day a cat's there, the next they're gone, with no trace, nothing, just gone, vanished. Her brown eyes closed in dread. Some say it's her. Varjak smiled and looked at Holly, expecting that she'd made a joke of it, but even Holly's tail swished anxiously. The truth is, no one knows, she said, black and white fur prickling. It's another reason why Ginger and his gang are so edgy right now. They've lost a lot of good cats. Who's next? That's the question. The question made Varjak think about home. Who'd be next for the gentleman and his cats now the elder Paw was gone? Ooh, he shivered at the thought. The world he came from and this world outside was so different. The gentleman and the blues meant nothing here. The Contessa's house had no gangs or vanishings. Was he all that connected the two worlds? So who was he? And where did he belong? He couldn't go home without a dog, that much he knew. What would it take to make a new life outside? Maybe I should be in a gang, mused Varjak. In a gang, it wouldn't matter that he wasn't a proper Mesopotamian blue, or that he'd failed his family. No one would know. No one would care. He could be himself. He could be part of something. He could even have friends. Gangs are always pushing you around, telling you what to do, said Holly. It's nothing but, yes, boss, this, and yes, boss, that. My gang would be different, said Varjak. You could do what you liked in my gang. And who's going to be in this gang with you? Well, there's you two, and me. That's a start. Sounds fun, said Tam. Holly laughed. Ha, you think so? And what about the small problem that one of our gang doesn't have a clue what he's doing? Varjak stopped and stood up straight. There were 5 of them, he protested. I don't mean that. I mean, well, everything. Everything you need to know to survive the city. How to find food and shelter, how to stay out of trouble, I can find food. I'm a hunter. He knew she didn't believe him, but he couldn't stop now. I'm the greatest hunter in the world. Ha! The greatest hunter in the world, she scoffed. You, pet cat Varjak, you couldn't even get your own breakfast. But Varjak wasn't listening anymore. Stung by Holly's words, he followed his senses down a turning off the street. He was going to show her. Why are you so mean to him, said Tam. It's obvious he can't Hunt, but there's no need. I haven't finished yet. Hey, Varjak, come back. You're not safe on your own. Where are you going? To get my own breakfast, he growled. Ooh. He could hear the buzz of streetlights, the roaring of dogs, the rumbling of the city that never stopped, but above all else, he could sense something else, something close, drawing him on. He followed it into the shadows, further from the lights. Come back here, shouted Holly. His eyes slowly adjusted to dark. Deep down the alleyway, he glimpsed a soggy mound of paper and boxes. He could smell food, salty, fishy, oily, but that wasn't what had drawn him. His awareness started to tingle. There was something else. It was as if he was being watched, not just by Holly and Tam, but by some part of the darkness, with eyes as black as shadow. He let his awareness flow out. What he sensed was odd and cold. Something not quite alive, but not quite dead either. He frowned. It felt wrong. Varjak Paw, it's dangerous down there. Come back right now. It was Holly. He turned, hushed her and turned back, the tension rising within him. But that strange sensation was gone, leaving no trace. Had he just imagined it? All this talk of vanishings was getting to him. Puzzled, he probed the shadows again with his whiskers. Motion. This time he felt motion, out there in the dark. What is it? Hidden behind the rubbish, something small and sleek was moving. A mouse. It was only a mouse. He let out the tension and grinned. That must have been it all along. Nothing more than a real, live and very breakfast-sized mouse. So this is it, he told himself. Your big moment, your first prey. This is not a toy. This is not a dream. It's real and it's happening now. Don't move. Not till it's in range. Don't even breathe. Here it comes. I think it's safe. Hunting, the third skill. When you stalk your prey, you become your prey. Varjak's senses went out to it, tracing its tiniest movements, merging with it in his mind. The mouse came closer, closer. Crack! His paw shot out, slapped the mouse head hard, stunned it, held it down, jaws closed around its neck, teeth sank in, the lethal bite. Varjak gasped. He'd killed for real, and it was like killing a part of himself. I'm sorry, he thought, for beginning to shake. I'm sorry, but I have to eat. Enough, and no more. That is the way the world is made. He stooped and gently picked up the body, his first kill. He gave silent thanks and crunched into his breakfast. It was strange. On the outside, it looked and even smelled like that toy mouse back in the Contessa's house. But as soon as he bit into it, he knew this was something new. It tasted so different to anything he'd eaten before. Real food, fresh and warm. It satisfied him completely. Did you see that? Said Tam. Did you see the way you did it, Holly? Bam! It never had a chance. I saw it, said Holly. Wasn't it something, beamed Tam? Where did you learn to do that, Varjak? Will you teach me? Actually, he admitted, that was the first time. Holly nodded. I thought it might be. Still, I've seen worse, a lot worse, she winked. Maybe you're not as useless as you look, Mr. Paw. Varjak smiled. He'd never have to rely on people again. He was a hunter now. He had the third skill. Tam's nostrils twitched. What's that smell? She said. Varjak and Holly sniffed the air. The alley curved away into complete darkness, and that salty, fishy tang was coming from a place they couldn't see further down. The scent reminded Varjak of the gentleman's caviar, another thing he'd never have to eat. It smells great, said Tam. I'm going after it. I wouldn't, warned Holly. We're too near Ginger's turf. You don't want to risk it. Wait for the park. Tam licked her chops. At least it's not her territory. And it smells so good, Holly. There's no one else around. It'll be okay. Come on, Varjak. Let's eat. You really like that smell, he said. It's already dangerous here, said Holly. I'm not going any further. Oh, you killjoy, muttered Tam. Holly knows best. Holly always knows best. It's true. I do. Well, I bet there's nothing to eat in the park, said Tam. So there. She was right. The park had been picked clean already. They could find no food at all. They came away hungry, except for Varjak Paw.